This is a Kettering City Council workshop meeting. Today's date is February the 23rd, and I will turn this over to Mr. Schwederman.
Thank you, Your Honor. We'll follow the standard format tonight for the workshop, and I'll have Steve put up the PowerPoint for this evening. I know that we had quite a bit of trouble with this first slide at the last meeting, so I hope I got it right this time, Your Honor.
All right.
Here's how we're going to handle the agenda items this evening. And I'll start with any questions on the agenda tonight, but I will preface that with we do have a short presentation from Steve on the petition that is on your agenda this evening. So, but if there are any other questions at this time?
I did have a question about the street change, so I guess we'll wait till we get to that then.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right, Steve, I'll turn it over to you and you can address the Waving Willow petition.
All right, thanks, Mark, and good evening, everyone. So Ron Hunt and I have been working with the property owner that lives at 1160 Waving Willow, who's here. And just for point of reference, this is up in the far northwest part of Kettering, Shantz Avenue over here. The Jewish cemetery is here, and Dayton Country Club is here. This is the corp line between between Kettering and Oakwood. It's for this north-south section of Waving Willow. They're requesting a street name change for just this section, not the entire length of Waving Willow. And there will be, so the process for this is we'll have the petition acceptance on your agenda this evening. We won't have a public hearing on this until late April, most likely your second meeting in April on the 27th. We will plan to mail a notice of the public hearing to the surrounding neighbors, both on Waving Willow and Lytle Lane by April 2nd. We'll have to advertise it for 3 weeks, not consecutively for 3 weeks, but three separate weeks in the newspaper, April 10th, 17th, and 24th, and we'll have a plan to have a public hearing on the 27th regarding this.
Hey, Steve, I just have one question. Is it okay to ask it at this time? It's not a public hearing, but the entrance to that particular property is on Waving Willow.
It's on Lytle.
I'm sorry. It's on Lytle. Yeah.
Yes.
Why? I'm curious why. And if you go across that section in yellow, there really isn't much of an entrance into the home there at all. What is his desire? Why does he want to do that? I'm just curious.
I don't know what the rules are with public hearings.
Yeah, and I don't want to. Yeah, right. If there's a public hearing, maybe we shouldn't even be discussing this.
I would probably wait and let the property owner explain that reasoning. I know there's some issues with mail delivery, and that's kind of what started this whole thing. And with the address numbers, because again, not to do this outside of public hearing, but if you notice the address numbers for this property, 1160 Waving Willow is the same address as 1160 Lytle Lane, right across the street. So apparently they've had issues or anticipating issues. They haven't owned the property for that long. They purchased it, I believe, last month.
Oh, okay. They're brand new owners. Okay, because there are some buildings on the Waving Willow side too. You know, you can see them there on the screen. Right. So I understand the confusion. I just was wondering what. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, I don't know.
We'll have a more comprehensive report on the public hearing, but that's kind of the gist of it.
All right.
That makes no sense to me.
I don't disagree, Don.
Excuse me. The addresses are the same, 1160, no matter what street name you put on it, Waving Willow Court or Lytle. How does that solve that problem of 1160?
Well, we would change the address. So we can change the address without a street name change. That's an option. But they have requested the street name change in addition to the address number change.
Well, then that makes sense. Okay.
The address change does not require action by council. It just requires the city engineer's approval to do that.
Post office doesn't have to get involved with that?
No, we just notify them, or we tell the owner to notify them. We do. It's fairly common for address changes. Street names are not common.
Any questions of Steve?
Yeah, I do have a question. And I was more, when I saw that, interested in, I don't believe I've seen in my time on council a change of street name come up. And I was just curious with what, and especially where it mentions a petition has been submitted. And I'm familiar, if you're running for council and you need 100 signatures or 200 signatures, what is our process on a street name change? I mean, when it comes to petitions?
That's a good question. And there is I don't have the ordinance off the top of my head, what number it is, but there is a ordinance that governs street name changes in our codified ordinances. And ways you can do it. You can do it by petition of a property. It doesn't have to be a majority or anything. It can be a property owner can petition council for a street name change, and then you go through a public hearing process, and then council makes a decision. The other process is that council can elect to rename a street. I believe they still have to hold a public hearing, but it can either be property owner directed or council directed. In this case, it was property owner directed.
Okay, cool.
There's a process and procedure for doing it, and that's just what we'll have to follow come April. But there'll be a more comprehensive report, but this is just kind of get you familiar.
Good. Thanks.
It is an odd thing. I've never seen one since I've been here, and a number of us have be the same way.
Can you report the house that is making the request? Is it the house that is on Lido Lane, and the person that will be affected is the other 1160?
No, the person that's making the request is here, this big property,
right,
on Waving, and their address is on Waving Willow. 1160, to my knowledge, isn't aware of the request. They will be once they receive notice, but to my knowledge, they're not even aware of the request to do any of this.
And that second one you're pointing to right now is technically a Lido Lane property?
Yeah, it's a Lido Lane.
So both driveways are both on Lido Lane.
Right.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yep.
That's what's so strange. The address is on Waving Willow, but you get into the house on Lido Lane. It's a beautiful lot. I gotta tell you, it's really nice up there.
It's a horrible lot. That thing has like a mountain on the side of it.
Well, okay, but it's big. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always wondered how that guy even cut his grass on that side of the thing. So
you might be thinking of a different. Okay.
So anyway, we'll return to this topic during the public hearing on the 27th of April.
Okay. Any other questions?
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. We'll go to the next slide now. And just a reminder, we've kind of put this out the last couple of meetings. We will go back to in-person/hybrid meetings beginning March 9th. And we are scheduled to have State of the City on March 9th, as well as a Citizen Life Saving Award on the 9th as well. And we will set up the council workshop in the deeds room and do our best for social distancing, and do the same thing in the council chambers as we did back in, I guess it's been October, September since we were last in the chambers. But that will start at our next council meeting on the 9th. Earlier today, I sent you an email that had some presentation material in it. And one of the things I sent you is a file that really is generated by Jack Jensen of First Tier Suburbs, and he's going to present the information tomorrow night at the First Tier Suburbs meeting. And it is basically a compilation of the American Rescue Plan and what the federal aid might look like to state and local government entities. So you have a compilation now that shows all of the first-tier suburb cities based upon the information that Jack was able to put together. Jack got that information from National League of Cities, OML, the Mayor's Alliance. A number of agencies and associations have now kind of provided links to that data. And I also included in the file that I sent you earlier today some information on how to read the information that's coming out. So you'll probably find that beneficial as a kind of a reference tool as you hear the media covering the activity this week at the federal government level. For the city of Kettering, the compilation will show that it's about $13 million of funding if the bill were to pass as it is presented and came out of committee. I'm not giving you any indication that that's going to happen, just that's our starting point. And it's $13 million. The method of calculation for the city of Kettering is based upon the fact that we're an entitlement city for community development block grant funding. So the bill sets aside a certain amount of money for those types of cities. They use some modified CDBG formula to calculate the money that would come to the city of Kettering. And in our case, that would be roughly $13 million. So that would be probably the highest number we'll see as it goes through negotiations and continues to move through the House and then onto the Senate. But just kind of want to give you that information. It'll be shared to Bill and Bruce tomorrow night with the first year suburbs meeting. And again, the file I sent you also has just some talking points and bill language to kind of go along with that number. So wanted you to have that more for reference as we move forward. The next item is Greater Dayton mayors and managers income tax survey results. And I also sent that to you as well. Roughly 24 cities responded to a request to just compare income tax revenue from 2019 to 2020. And Kettering, as you know, from material we presented to you a few weeks back, we finished at 0.6% above 2019 for a strong finish in December. The mean for the 20, in this case, 23 cities is a negative 1.87%. And the numbers vary, and that's why I sent you the full survey. It's just a real quick 2-pager, and it shows declines as high as almost 11%, and then increases, probably the largest increase, close to 5%. So just wanted you to have that information. A more detailed income tax summary is completed by our tax division for the Greater Dayton Mayors and Managers Association. That'll get done more likely in late March as we wait for accrual numbers to come in from all the other cities. And I'll share that with you as well when that data becomes available. Any questions on those two documents?
Hey, Mark, is there any a time frame when 2020 will officially be closed?
Yeah, good question, Tony. As a matter of fact, we brought the auditors in this week. So our independent accounting auditing firm is in the city building now. They'll be here for roughly a month. We will have tentative numbers to the auditors shortly for the compiled statements for 2020. And then it's our hope that by the end of middle of actually March, I believe, we'll have a kind of a draft opinion or a draft comment from the auditors. So hopefully by the end of March, you will have not necessarily a CAFR in front of you, but a presentation from me with where we finish the year based upon those final results. So we're very close to a draft number, and then we'll share the final numbers with you after the auditors get a look at it.
Have we noticed any increase in refund request?
Tony, I haven't asked that direct question of our staff. They have not brought anything to my attention. And it is still a little early. We did get an update this morning that The traffic is picking up at the tax division last week and this week, so we're making arrangements to make sure we can accommodate that. But they did not bring to light any increase in refund requests or how we're handling those, but I can check on that.
Thank you.
All right, Steve, our next slide with just a quick COVID-19 update. Our task force met on Monday to kind of go over the current situation and have some comments for you on that, but also wanted to just start with giving you a brief synopsis of our numbers. And again, we're started the week off in a very good position with 0 positive cases, only 1 quarantine, and 8 symptomatic employees. And as you know, symptomatic employees are, if you have a single symptom that could be COVID, you need to stay home. Obviously, it could also be a runny nose or a sore throat or a cold. Right now, we have 8 employees as of yesterday that were symptomatic, but half of those employees anticipated getting a diagnosis so they could come back to work. So this is probably the 3rd straight week where we've had really good numbers in that regard. So we had a couple policy decisions to make from the task force yesterday. And one of them is our current work from home model is set to expire on the last day of February. And we recommended as a task force to the department directors, and we all agreed that on March 1st, we will return back to normal office locations for all employees. So we were there in October, November. Then we started work from home again in December, and we'll go back to normal operations on March 1st. So that'll be a little bit of a change. And frankly, it's a little bit of a change. Most departments have already moved towards that in the last couple of weeks. As an example, my office was at 100% capacity this week. We also had a number of policies that were set to expire at the end of March. And obviously, COVID is not gone. So we're making policy changes to reflect that we need to continue some of these COVID-related policies. And we're going to run those through essentially the last pay period in December. So I think December 19th. I can, as the city manager, change those policies or stop those policies at any time as well. So if COVID is gone on July 1st, then we can, terminate those policies effective then. But right now, we're just going to kind of set that December 19th date for the majority of our COVID-related policies that essentially relate to what happens if you're quarantined, if you're sick, or if you have to care for somebody who's quarantined or sick, and how the leave is handled and how your time is handled. So we made those suggestions today, and we'll get all those policies updated. Any questions on COVID-19?
Yeah, Mark, I understand keeping things in place till December 19th. Is there any thought of looking at over time the travel concerns for our staff in terms of training or conferences, presentations, kind of things that are out of state? I understand, we're kind of keeping it in state right now. Any thought to that?
Yeah, we have not changed the in-state versus out-of-state travel restriction at this point. We've left it in-state at this point, and the budgets reflect in-state. So if we change that, we would have to make those necessary changes. We have had a few employees who are attending, national conferences, if you will, because they're being held virtually, and we're participating in that. And for example, Bruce, I'll be attending the National League of City Conference here at the beginning of March. Virtual.
So
as part of my responsibilities with the Ohio Municipal League. So, we do have some options, but at this point, we're not lifting that restriction. And frankly, at this point, it's because of the budget limitations and to make that change.
Yeah, and most conferences aren't meeting anyway. I'm just thinking if they start up in the fall, whatever. Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, you have the ability to approve travel on an individual basis.
I do, yes.
Any other questions?
So the next item we have for you is a presentation by Steve again on some of our current bid openings or past bid openings here recently. So Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks. This next slide is kind of a summary of where we stand as far as bid openings are concerned for this year. And I will tell you that we've had a very good run of bid openings, and I'm not here tonight to jinx it, but we've done very well so far. We've opened bids on 4 projects, 3 of our maintenance programs, and then also Donation Circle, which is that cul-de-sac off College Drive that is part of the Life Connection development. So far we're running about $469,000 to the good, under budget for those 4 projects combined. We still have 3 more major projects to open up bids on. The first one will be this Thursday for the Marshall Road project between David and the South Corp line. We also have our 2021 concrete repair program, which is primarily repairs to concrete street panels. And then obviously our biggest one is the County Line Road widening project that will open up, excuse me, on March 4th, along with concrete repair. So hopefully we continue the trend. Asphalt prices have come in a little under what we estimated, but when you translate that to large quantities, it adds up to a bigger number. And concrete quantities have come in, concrete prices have come in significantly lower than past years, which is good. So just a couple notes on the two other projects that are either ongoing or coming up. We had a pre-construction meeting with ODOT in the last couple of weeks for the Far Hills resurfacing project, which will be from East David to Oakwood. Barrett Paving is the contractor for that project, and they plan on starting with preliminary work in late April, but work really begin in earnest on or around May 10th. And then they anticipate completion after the 4th of July on that project. So if we hopefully do end up having a holiday at home parade this year, it'll be completely done in time for that, those festivities. And then also the Ridgeway Bridge project, that's progressing well. They have both of the abutment walls for the new bridge poured, both on the north and south sides. And right now they're working on forming up the retaining walls that go behind the abutment walls on the north side. And as of right now, they plan to pour the walls on the north side this coming Friday morning. So they're progressing. They got a little backed up because of the weather the last 2 or 3 weeks. But now that the forecast is improving, things should be starting to pick back up out there. So that's all I have on that, Mark, if you want to.
Steve, I got a question. On the county line widening, that's the total dollar figure. Beaver Creek's participating in that, correct?
Yes, they are. They are. Yep.
Okay. So that's the total cost, not just our portion of the cost.
Right. Yeah. We have to budget the entire amount because it's a reimbursement thing from Beaver Creek. So yeah, that's the entire estimated construction cost or budget. But we have over a $2 million grant from the federal government and VRPC, and then Kettering and Beaver Creek are splitting the remainder 50-50.
Thank you.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Steve, a general question. Is there a standard amount of time between when you put a project out to bid and a bid opening? I've always wondered that.
It's for city projects, non-complex projects like our asphalt overlay program, concrete repair, that's pretty cut and dry. We advertise those bids for 2 weeks. More complicated projects like Donation Circle, the County Line Road, Ridgeway Bridge, we would do those for 3 weeks. For federal projects like County Line or Ridgeway, we have to do them for 3 weeks. That's required by law.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Steve, if a bid comes in lower than the budgeted amount, and you have a project that obviously what you budgeted is going to take care of all the areas you're trying to fix, can you add something to it? like a couple more concrete panels on some streets?
Yes, we can. And
Okay.
I would refer to Mr. Schwederman and City Council on that one, whether we do that or not.
Well, I guess my only comment on that would be is if we're getting good bids in for concrete repair, that might not be the situation next year. I mean, I don't know what it is, but if it comes in $20,000 cheaper, maybe we would be better off. I'm worried about County Line Road with the increase in gas prices that have come along here in the last few weeks. So,
yeah, so let's come back to you at a meeting in March once we have all the bids put together and we know what the final number is, because these are just raw, non-broken down numbers, but we have breakdowns as far as how much gas tax money we're spending and making sure we're spending all those dollars and concrete versus asphalt. We can do all that breakdown, but we're about 2 weeks ahead of being able to do that for everything.
Okay.
And Steve, refresh my memory on Marshall Road. Does it starts at Stroop and goes south?
Starts at David and goes south.
David.
When's the plan for north of that up to the day or credit union area?
Yeah, as it stands right now,
that's in bad shape.
Yeah, as it stands right now in the CIP, and again, we haven't really started work on the 2022 CIP yet. We'll do that start that here in March. But as it stands right now, the section between David and Stroop would be in for next year. And then the section from Stroop to Wilmington would be in 23. That's as we sit here today. I mean, obviously that we'll have to, when I put that together every year, I took a fresh look at everything to make sure we're doing what we need to be doing. But that's as we sit here today, that's how it's programmed.
Okay, because that one Stroop, that last section is pretty bad. And I was thinking back to Tony's question. Maybe there's another, $100,000 in there on a low bid we could add it.
Yeah.
Thanks, dude.
Steve, why don't you go ahead and you got the next presentation as well. You received a memo on the flood insurance, floodplain mapping project that Steve's working on with planning. And we decided maybe it's a rather lengthy number of slides, but Steve will go through it quickly. And then you'll also have this presentation as reference material for you at a later date. So all yours, Steve.
Okay, thanks again, Mark. We were notified, I guess, well, it was a number of years ago, we were notified that Montgomery County was going to go through a process with FEMA to update all the flood maps countywide. And they do this periodically. The last update was in 2005. And so Montgomery County is basically due to have this done again. So we were notified of this a number of years ago. I think COVID's delayed things a little bit, but now FEMA and their consultant are finally ramping up and getting ready to have these new maps made effective. It won't be for a while, but this kind of is starting the process of getting out the information out to the public. And there will be an open house soon about this, but I'll get into that here in a minute. So that's the reason we wanted to come to you tonight, to kind of give you a preview of some of the information that's going to be presented during the virtual open house. It won't be a physical open house, but during the virtual open house that residents will be invited to that are potentially affected by this change. So what I wanted to do is just kind of run through a few of the slides again quickly, because you did get this earlier today in an email, but just kind of run through some of the preview of what they're going to be talking about during the open house. So I think most of you probably have heard of the National Flood Insurance Program or familiar with it, but it's really a three-pronged approach to mitigating and managing floods in the United States. There's a mapping component, which is what they're talking about doing now as far as the updates. There's a management component, which is what myself, Tom Robillard, and John Sleemers get into and working with residents on management. And then there's the flood insurance component, which is for individual homeowners, property owners to deal with if they have a property located in the 100-year floodplain. Some of the goals, obviously, of this program, obviously, they want to reduce life, and particularly property, reduce those losses caused by flooding. They have disaster relief costs caused by flooding. And then obviously we want to maintain the functionality of the floodplains, which unfortunately, most of the floodplains in Kettering have been built upon. So we do have potential losses for homes in Kettering if a 1% chance flood were to happen. So this is really a partnership between federal, state, and local. We deal with not so much with the federal government, but we do deal with the state government from time to time, particularly ODNR, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. They provide a lot of resources for us to use, and particularly when it comes to update our ordinances. And I'll talk about a little bit more about that here in a minute. The program is voluntary. We are a community that participates in it. We also participate in the community rating system, or the CRS system, which by our participation in that program, it means that we maintain our floodways and manage our floodways at a little bit higher level than a community that may not be involved in that type of program. So it does allow for our residents to receive a small discount on their flood insurance. And so we work annually to keep that program updated. And then every 5 years, which this is a 5-year, 21 is a 5-year review cycle on that. This fall, they'll do a more in-depth review on site of our management program to make sure they're meeting all those standards. So we have a pretty good flood management program in Kettering. I think it works well. And frankly, it needs to work well because we do have a number of properties that are in the floodplain in Kettering. So talking more about the flood maps in particular, these are the main reasons that that FEMA identifies these areas that have an increased risk of flooding. They're used to make decisions, frankly. A good example of this would be development in the floodplain, potentially in Research Park. There was, the article that came out today in today's paper about that one development that's proposed in Research Park potentially has a flood impact, and so we're going to have to work closely with the developer, assuming they move forward with the project. We're going to have to work closely with them in the future to make sure that they're mitigating the flood risks that the development might cause. So why is FEMA doing this? Well, it's really part of a regular program that they do to update these maps. Again, the last time they did this was in 2005. Between 2005 and now, there have been a number of small revisions to the floodplains in Kettering based on hydrologic studies that have been performed. And this update will kind of capture all of those revisions that have been made. So again, in the memo, if you recall the memo that you received in your packet on Friday from John Sleemers, it kind of gave an overview of floodplains in general, but there was a map on the first page that showed Kettering and how it's divided into 2 different watersheds. So basically everything west of Schroyer and Ackerman drains to the Great Miami. Everything east of that line, a Schroyer-Ackerman line drains east of Little Miami. Everything west of that line drains west to the Great Miami. So they are in the process of updating pretty much all of the drainage areas in Kettering and the entire county. And one thing I'll note here on the very last bullet point is that they are using the most current topography data that the county has. They didn't have this available in 2005 when they did the flood study. They do now, and it's all digital, it's all electronic. So these maps are going to be far more accurate than the 2005 maps. And even the 2005 maps were an update in accuracy from the previous maps. So with every iteration of this, they're getting more and more exact on where the floodplains would be based on topography. These are just this is just a quick map showing Kettering and Centerville and Washington Township and where the particular streams in southeast Montgomery County are located. The ones highlighted in red are the ones that are in Kettering, the biggest of which are the branches of Little Beaver Creek, and then the Penn Creek and South Boulevard Creek also feed into that. The little north branch of Little Sugar Creek is down by Mr. Wanamaker's neighborhood, and that feeds into Greene County just north of Madison's Grant and goes on into Sugar Creek Township. So talking about a timeline for this, again, I mentioned the last countywide update of the FERM, or the flood insurance rate map, which is this is known as, was in 2005. So they've been working on this latest update. Really, the first I had heard about it, I think, was in the fall of 2019, I believe, was when they first kind of introduced it to us. So they've been working and getting the rate maps identified, been doing the hydrologic studies that go along with it. The red dot on there was a meeting that we had over Zoom with FEMA and their consultant to kind of introduce this public process they're going to go into starting soon. So they are planning to have a virtual open house on March 16th at 5:30 p.m. It'll be done via Zoom. We are planning to mail postcards to approximately 1,100 affected property owners in Kettering to help get the word out about the open house. Then once that is complete, we will go into, or we, and really it's FEMA and their consultant, they'll go into an appeal period where people will have a chance to appeal their either, well, mostly an inclusion into the floodplain. And there's going to be a difference between an appeal and a comment. An official appeal will involve a survey of the property and actual technical data to be submitted with their appeal for that particular property. They also take comments, which are non-technical in nature, but really the only way that a person can get out of the floodplain, if they're going to be in it, they need to submit data that would show that they need to be out of it. So that's,
Steve?
Yes.
The 1,100, are those 1,100 additional Kettering residents are going to be included, or that's 1,100 people total that historically have been in the floodplain, plus the new ones that might now be included?
Yes to number two.
Okay.
Yes, it's not 1,100 new. It's just every affected property in Kettering, whether they're in now or going to be out or going to be in on the new maps. Every property in Kettering that's been affected has been highlighted, and we've identified those.
I have a follow-up question. Of the 1,100, do you know approximately how many are new?
I don't at this time. I'll show you some maps here in a little bit and kind of explain how that works, but we haven't had a hard count yet and dove deep enough into the maps to be able to determine that at this point.
So this is something I think when you go to sell your house, you now have to state that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Steve, for the new people versus the people that have been in this, in the past, do we differentiate that postcard invite or any information to them that, it's kind of new for them, perhaps? Do we explain something a little bit more?
We don't in the postcard. We're just letting them know about the open house, and the presentation, I think, will be very similar to what you're seeing tonight. And this has been whittled down from about almost 50 slides. So right. It's pretty comprehensive of what they're going to learn about directly from FEMA and their consultant.
Yeah, okay. I just, all right.
So again, I'll kind of breeze through these because I know you guys have them. We will need to update our ordinance to the new model ordinance, but we won't need to do that for a while. Again, if you remember on the last slide, these maps won't become effective until fall of 2022. So we'll be talking about this over the next, 18 to 24 months, but we will need to update our ordinance at some point, just not right away. These flood insurance slides, again, you have these, so I won't spend a whole lot of time on this. I think the main point to point out on this one is the first one. is that homeowners insurance typically does not cover flooding. So you homeowners can be surprised, especially even if they don't live in a flood prone area. If your basement or house floods, your standard homeowners policy does not cover flooding. So I think many people sometimes get surprised by that, but I think that's something that ought to be pointed out more often, is that you can buy flood insurance to protect your home, even if it's not in a flood risk area. Flood insurance, particularly in Kettering, the vast majority of our homes or properties in Kettering that have been developed or built on are what are considered pre-firm. So they're developed in, since we were built out in the 50s and 60s and into the early 70s, most of our properties, particularly in areas that are flood prone in Kettering, are all pre-firm. And that's good, because if you go on to the next slide, anything that's pre-firm, when the flood insurance rate maps were initially established, and for Kettering, they were initially established in late 1970s, any pre-firmed property gets flood insurance at a subsidized rate. Anything post-firm is higher, and it's done at an actuarial rate, so it's going to be more closely tied to what the actual damage potential would be. So for better or for worse, most of our residents are getting a subsidized rate on their insurance if they need to have it. We talked a little bit about this before, with the question of who's going to be in, who's going to be out. Some people may be in for the first time. They won't necessarily get a knock at their door that you're in, and all of a sudden you have to buy flood insurance. But when they go to sell their home, or when they go to get a home equity loan on the property, then they likely will have a flood insurance issue to deal with. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people on the phone about this very issue in my tenure here, that they get that surprise that they don't have a mortgage on their home, they live in their home for 40 years. Pretty high level of some of the changes that they're making. So this first one is over in the Acorn Walk neighborhood, and this is the Acorn Walk senior housing development that was built off of Peach Orchard a number of years ago, and then these are the homes for the Acorn Walk. This is the area of Gentilly Park that we've talked about building a neighborhood park in that area. So for those of us that have been here a long time and can remember when Desi was still Desi, there used to be an old railroad spur that ran along in this area here that was up in the air, maybe 15, 20 feet. The current flood maps are based off the old topography. So they're showing this area as being elevated, even though this rail spur has been cut down. And so when they use the 2016 topography data for the entire county, now the areas like here in yellow, this will be in the new floodplain area because it's been lowered by 10, 15 feet, and it's flat with the rest of the area.
Wow.
Over here in Acorn Walk, if you look at on this one, it's blue. It's in the floodplain, but when they built that, they elevated it and proved that it's, they built it to an elevation above the floodplain. And so now this area, which is kind of in a green shade, will be out of the floodplain based on what they've done before. So they're really doing a good job of using the new topography data versus what they did back in the early 2000s. This is an example of over near State Farm Park. And the reason I put this one up here is just kind of show a couple areas where what's here in kind of the salmon color is the 500-year floodplain. What's in the blue is the 100-year floodplain. And then what's in this hatched red and blue area is the floodway. So this is where the actual creek is when it's not flooding. So pay attention right here down on Fields Avenue, Vale Drive, that area. So this is where it is today. This is what it's going to be when it's changed. So these areas in yellow along Fields, some of these properties, which they were not in before, particularly this one like right here, they're potentially going to be in now unless they do some extra work to determine that they may not be. So these are some of the particular properties that we're going to be concerned about, and advising and guiding people for how they can potentially challenge or appeal the results that the new maps are showing. And then the last one I'll show is Mr. Wanamaker should be very familiar with this one. This is over off of Meadow Park, just to the border of Greene County. This is on the Little Sugar Creek. Madison's Grant is over on the far southeast corner of the map over in this area, Madison's Grant. So this is what the map looks like today officially. We did a flood study on this back in, I believe, 2006, 2007 timeframe, where this used to be an unstudied area. It didn't have flood elevations established, but it does now based on our study. And so once the new maps become effective, this is what the official floodplain will look like on the maps. This is what it is today based off the revision, but it will be officially produced onto the countywide map now. So they're doing those as well. So that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know we have a number of things to go back to get to tonight, but if there's any quick questions, I'll be happy to answer them right now.
I think we're just going to have to follow this clear as mud. So, you know,
yeah,
I would, are we going to be prepared to help our residents understand and navigate this? I mean, this is going to be a pain in the ass.
Yes, yes, we are. I'm very well versed in it. I was talking to Mark about this earlier today, and I can remember back in 2005, my very wise predecessor, Mr. Follenkamp, gave me this project in 2005, and kind of with a chuckle. And it was a lot of phone calls, a lot of walking people through the process, and we're very well versed in doing it. Tom Roblard's engaged in it. John Sleemers is engaged in it as well. So we're very well prepared to help people out on an individual basis. We can't do any survey work for people. You know, if they want to challenge it, they're gonna have to hire their own surveyors and things like that to do their work on their end. But we can certainly work in an advisory capacity. And
hey, Steve.
Yeah.
The postcard you referenced earlier in your presentation, is that ours or is that from FEMA?
It's from us. It's from
us.
I
think, and I'm not implying that we wouldn't, but I think we have to do a really good job of explaining what the heck this is about for residents. I would suspect a lot of residents don't even know they're in a floodplain, may not know what a floodplain is. Yeah. And I think the more explanations, you know, the KISS theory, keep it simple, stupid type approach to language would be very beneficial if we can write the postcard.
Right, and we are writing the postcard. The purpose of this postcard right now is just to get people directed to the open house.
But they have to know what the open house is about and why they should go there.
Right. Yeah, there's some explanation on that on the postcard. We'll provide you guys a copy of it in the packet, so you'll see it. But yeah, John did a good job of kind of putting some preliminary information in there about why it's important and why people need to pay attention to this.
Okay, thank you.
I'm envisioning, you know, working with Mary over the next, you know, year plus to get information in contact with Kettering and kind of get the word out about this, because it is a big change. And again, they don't do this very often, but this is one of the bigger ones they're going to do for us.
Steve, I mean, the neighborhoods you were showing with these floodplains aren't exactly people that may have discretionary dollars to do this site survey, whatever needs to be done to appeal this or change it. Are there any state or federal dollars through grants that the city can apply for, or city dollars or something there? Because I mean, when I look at some of those neighborhoods and the values of the properties there, I think it's going to be problematic for some of those people, even if they have a legitimate case, to be able to come up with dollars to change it or to update it or whatever the hell you call it. So
yeah, they may. The short answer on the grant question is not that I'm aware of. A typical, you know, to hire a surveyor to do the field work and prepare the paperwork for FEMA, you know, that can run you between $500 and $1,000. When you compare that to I know that's all discretionary funds, and not everybody has that kind of cash to scrape together. I understand that. What we try to explain to people is that, if you do have that type of disposable money lying around, when you compare that cost and the potential ability to get out of the flood insurance requirement, you compare that cost to the cost of the insurance over the life of the property, it's kind of pennies on the dollar to do that. And again, I get that it's, $500 for some is a lot of money compared to some other people. But this will not be the only chance they get to appeal this. They'll have an appeal process, but there's always the letter of map amendment process that they can do anytime. So they're not going to be necessarily under the gun to do this right away. If the map becomes effective, they can always appeal this through that letter of map amendment process, which is a standard process anybody can do anytime.
Well, we better be prepared to answer a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah, we will be.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions of Steve here? Okay.
Thanks, Steve. Our next presentation will be Chief Prossman, and we're just coming back to you to chat with you about the arrangement that we have currently scheduled to take place on January of 2022 for the contract for dispatching services. And so we just have 2 slides for you, and then I'll have a recommendation for you at the end of those 2 slides. So Chief, I can't see you, but I assume you're out there.
I'm out here. Steve, you can just put it all up if you'd like, the whole slide. Good evening, everybody. I'll be real quick because we have talked about this for a while now. This has to do with the Miami Township and taking over dispatch responsibilities for them in 2022. Currently, Kettering has 13 full-time dispatchers, and we utilize 1 part-time dispatcher as well. If you remember from the contract that was signed with Miami Township, we need 3 additional full-time dispatchers to handle the workload from them. What we are requesting tonight, what we'd like to see tonight, is that the city manager will give us authorization to overfill our positions to get those to 16. And if that happens, we're going to start recruiting tomorrow. The reason why the push is because we need to get people hired and trained and have them ready to start taking calls January 1st. And that takes quite a while to do that, obviously. So what we're hoping is we start recruiting tomorrow. We will have people hired by summer, and then from summer to the end of the year will be their training period, and they'll be ready to go. The ordinance right now authorizes us to have 14 full-time positions. We need to increase that to 16, obviously, but we're not asking for that tonight. We're just asking to overfill that. We'd like to come back to you later on and ask for the ordinance to be changed. And the reason for that is that we would also like to look at civilian supervisors as well. Steve, you can go to the next slide. What we're looking at right now, what we're trying to figure out is with the supervisors is, do we want to go with 1 or possibly 2? And we're looking at the salaries that they would be paid, whether or not they're going to be classified or unclassified, exempt or non-exempt, and looking at funding to see how we can cover the cost for them. We believe, but we're still looking into this, that we may be able to do that without any added expense. But we don't want to present that right now until we have everything gathered and looked at. And that's why we'd like for you to hold off on changing the ordinance until we figure this out, then we could do it all at the same time. And again, the reason for just going with civilian dispatch or civilian supervisors, we've talked about this in length, obviously, is we think it'll be more consistent supervision instead of just rotating sworn personnel in and out. And it gives us the opportunity to move a sworn position, a sergeant, over to our operations and have them start working the street, which is where we're ultimately trying to get to, with adding more bodies onto the street. So that's what we're here for tonight, is just asking for the ability to overfill the dispatch position so we can get to 16 and start to get those people hired.
Chief, the civilian supervisor was part of the recommendation from, I don't remember, whoever did that study.
The matrix study, that's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions of Chip, Chief?
Well, what's classified and unclassified? I know what exempt and non-exempt is.
Whether or not civil service employees or not, Sarah's on and wants to answer that, but whether or not they're appointed or they're civil service employees.
Okay, gotcha.
Jackie brings up a good point at just kind of bringing to light that we have a number of things yet that we need to decide on. And so that's why the presentation tonight is essentially, we need to fulfill the obligations of Miami Township and get into the planning stages. And for that in January of 2022, starting, as the chief said, almost immediately with the recruiting for those 3 additional dispatchers. The ordinance allows me to overfill positions. And that's what we're saying this evening, is since we already have dispatchers in the ordinance, I can overfill those positions until we make the actual changes to the ordinance. We've done that in the past. It happens occasionally. Just wanted to make you aware of that this evening. At some point, hopefully in the near future, we will finalize what we think the civilian supervisor position might look like. And we would bring that back to you, have that conversation, and then make a final recommendation on what the ordinance change would be. And then we'd go through the ordinance process, which, as you know, is presented to you in workshop, put it onto council meetings for it to become effective. So that's kind of our thought process at this point. Just wanted to make you aware of it tonight and see if there was any concerns. If there's not, literally, I believe this week we would start the posting process for those dispatchers.
Mark, just a question here. You're proposing going up to 16. Did we have more to give you some room and flexibility, or I mean,
yeah, we're actually texting and tweeting about that right now, but we have 13 full-time dispatchers currently in our ordinance, or that are employed and working. We have a part-time dispatcher as well. We have budget for part-time dispatchers, I think for 50 hours a week, I believe, but we only have 1 part-time dispatcher currently working for us. The ordinance actually allows for 14 full-time dispatchers. We've been doing 13 and part-time. So we'll overfill. We know where we want to be after Miami Township implementation is 16 full-time dispatchers. So where we could, to use your term, Mayor, have some wiggle room, I guess, would be in the budget authorization for part-time. And if we look at this in the next month, as we're putting together the civilian supervisor presentation, if we need something else or need to do something a little differently, we can include that in that presentation and then ultimately include that in whatever the final ordinance recommendation is.
That's fine. I just wanted you to have the ability for flexibility, being that we're starting with Miami Township in January, so you don't have to go through this process of a month, 2 months, or whatever. So
I appreciate that. Understood. Okay.
Any other questions?
Will there be 3 positions now that will open up in the organization where these calls were getting answered before? Does that make any sense?
Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah.
You're going to want to hire 3 more people to take care of this new demand we're going to have.
Correct.
That demand's being satisfied in some other organization right now. Will there be 3 people, probably well, I'd say losing their job or being available, experienced dispatchers coming out of those places?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't answer that. I do know that the turnover rate of where we're taking Miami Township from is pretty high. So through attrition, I would imagine that can be covered.
I think the 20,000 foot level answer to that would be, it will be an external recruitment. So we'll be receiving external applicants.
Yeah, okay. Experienced people probably. Yeah.
Could be, yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so I thinking we're good at this point on this topic. I saw some thumbs up and some head shakes in an affirmative direction. All right. We will move forward and very quickly with that recruiting process. Your Honor, I believe at this point we are ready for executive session.
Okay, is there a motion to enter into executive session under section 121.06K of the codified ordinances for the purpose of labor negotiations?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Good. Can we just do a voice vote, Ted, or do we have to do a roll call vote?
You can do a voice vote, Your Honor.
All those in signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Yeah. We are in executive session.
Okay, we're good.
All right, we are now back on the record. Mr. Sweeterman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Unless there are any other topics you would like brought forward, we are done with our presentations for this evening, and we can end a little early, take a break before the council meeting.
Can I ask one question? Maybe two questions. One, I need a favor. Y'all sending this stuff to me today. I don't get to it. So if we really need to read it before workshop, I really need it in the packet, because the day of the meeting, just I can't get to it. I go straight from work to here. So no,
that's fine, Jackie, and we understand that. Yeah. The information we sent you this afternoon is just for your future reference. You didn't need it.
Yeah, perfect. So my other question is too, and I guess I'm looking for a little bit of vibe from the rest of the council members. So when it was so bad and the weather was bad, I had a senior citizen call me about where is our warming center, and so Steve gave me a buzz and informed me that typically it would be at the Latham, and with COVID, that kind of throws a wrinkle and stuff. And I guess I just want to hear from everybody else as to, I guess, what is our unified feeling of what we should be, what we should do, maybe not what we should say, what we should do. So I guess hopefully our weather's done, and this is going to be OBE until summertime when it gets hot as hell and everybody loses their electric and they need a cooling system, a cooling center. But I guess I want to make sure that we have, even with COVID, that we have a place if somebody really needed to have a place. And so, yeah, I just wasn't real comfortable with the full answer I got. And I don't know.
Jackie,
so my question.
Jackie,
yes,
had she lost her heat, or was she just asking, curious, what are we doing?
Yet. Well, that was what I asked her too. I said, ma'am, have you lost your electric? And she said, no, not yet. But with the ice coming, I just want to make sure I have somewhere to go. And I gave her an off the cuff answer, which was, well, I believe it would be the rec center, would be logical. And then several hours later, I found out that I was sort of kind of not really right. But and we ended up the ice didn't take everybody's electric out. But yeah. And I can't imagine anybody getting in their car, quite frankly, with the weather as bad as it was, to drive anywhere. You had to have literally no heat whatsoever to be able to venture out in the bad weather. But I don't know. I feel like we are a city, and we're a very prideful city of our services and caring for our residents. And I just want to make sure we have good plans in place. And yeah.
Well, I hate to repeat myself, but at the 20,000 foot level again, the plans we have for that are really directed by the Red Cross, and they're the ones that have centers throughout the community and the county for these types of events. We have made our facilities available to Red Cross in the past to, be on their list, if you will. They've not chosen our sites. In the past, and examples that we've had where power was out, if you remember I guess what would have been the windstorm, hurricane type activity we had several years ago, we then worked with our local churches and with our rec center to provide more, I would say, more daytime type relief. And then Red Cross was the overnight relief. So we have been able to utilize our facilities to accommodate specific situations. But again, at the 20,000 foot level, the base point are the Red Cross shelters and how those operate.
Hey, Mark, a question on Red Cross. Is that a 24/7 hotline, or does somebody go online with that to find those shelters? How's that work?
Well, a lot of it comes down to like the 411 information from that the United Way runs, and they partner and get that information out. And then, of course, we do the same thing with the methods that are available to us. Sometimes we can't use the internet if there's no power, right? But we get the information out as well. So in local media, again, going back to the windstorm that we had that knocked the power out for several days, the local media directed our residents to the Red Cross centers, our rec center, and the facilities that we were able to partner with. Christ United Methodist Church, for example, we partnered or opened with them so that people could come in during the day and just charge cell phones and do things like that. So we're able to get the word out. It just is, again, storm dependent on what mechanism we're using.
Mark, we kind of know that, we know the 411 to 211 with United Way and so forth, and Christchurch and all that. For a resident that, maybe is new or elderly and doesn't quite, get that sort of stuff, is there one central place that they could call, like Jackie's constituent, to get that specific information? Or do they sort of, I know we tell them where to do this, what I mean?
Yeah, typically that's the Red Cross, Bruce, if I remember these things correctly. That's the typical point of jumping off of those phone calls. Again, we do everything we can to help, and we have in the past opened some of our buildings up for utilization, and frankly, a couple of times I remember nobody came, but they were available.
So we would direct them to the Red Cross then, as a council person. If somebody, Jackie's call, direct them to the Red Cross, and then they're in touch with us. Okay.
Probably the most recent example would be the tornadoes from a little over a year ago, or 2 years now almost. Again, the shelters were opened up, and we actually had one in our community made available for folks in North Dayton. So again, that's the standard process. And then it's a game day decision really on how our facilities can assist and what we can do to help our residents. The nice thing about our community is residents help each other. So that's very helpful. Then we can certainly fill in the gaps, not so much for the overnight stay. Again, that's the Red Cross that helps with that. But, if push comes to shove and we can help, we do. A key indicator, or a key situation in all of those situations is the availability of generators and what buildings have generators that can be of assistance.
I think what Jackie's asking is, if we're not going to be the point of where we get relief, that we have a consistent message that we give people as far as what to do. And I hear what you're saying from your 20,000 square feet, that we tell them the Red Cross and all. So, and the event you highlighted happened in September, and it was nice weather then. So the only thing that was inconvenience is you maybe were a little warm and your groceries spoiled, but you didn't freeze to death. So I think this whole Texas thing pointed out some, every once in a while, take a look at something. So any other business coming before us? Stop. All right, if everybody can be back at 7:30 for our 7:35 start. And Mary, if you can call me on my cell phone and give me a pronunciation of the gentleman from, is it RTA? RTA, that would be great. And Bruce, if you would do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I got it. Thanks.